These images you see are not from Moscow or Tehran. This chaos comes from NATO's most strategic ally, the Kingdom of Denmark, right at the heart of the alliance. Washington calculated that it could reapply the 19th century Alaska model. Put money on the table and take over a strategic geography. However, the images coming from the streets of Copenhagen and Nuuk on the morning of January 17th prove that the White House's calculations did not work out. Greenland should be free. Greenland should be for the Greenlanders, not for the Americans. We are not interested in being Americans. The people of Greenland have struggled with the harshest conditions of nature for centuries. Now, as reflected in these images captured on camera, they are fighting the greatest political battle for survival in their history. I think that's quite silly, and I think it's quite out of mind, and most Greenlandic people don't actually agree with, because we are our own people and our own land. This wave of protests, which began on January 17th and is still ongoing, has turned into a single slogan along the 4.0 km stretch from Nuuk to Copenhagen. Kalalit Nunnet, that is, land of the people. According to information verified by field sources, more than 20,000 protesters gathered in the streets of Copenhagen and marched directly to the U.S. Embassy with Greenland flags in their hands. Simultaneously in Nuuk, at -20 degrees, Greenland Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen and the Speaker of Parliament personally initiated a vigil of honor in front of the U.S. consulate. The reaction we see here is not against the American people, but a stance of sovereignty against the tone of the current administration in Washington. The most critical detail here is the language of the crowd. Protesters are responding to Trump not in English but in their local language, Kalaallisut. This is a strategic message to Washington: you can't understand us because you can't buy us. Footage from the streets of Nuuk shows slogans chanted by the local people, proving that this is not a bargaining table but a battle for dignity. Another detail that stands out in the footage is the ironic hats. Make America go away! This slogan is the most concrete proof that fear of a superpower has given way to confident national anger. However, this slogan is not an expression of hatred, but a humorous expression of the local people's desire to have a say in their own land. This is the clearest response to Trump's strategy. We are one, and we are definitely not for sale. Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen's words actually sum it all up and mark the end of diplomatic courtesy. We choose Denmark, we choose NATO, we choose the Kingdom of Denmark, we choose the EU. Greenland has determined its own future within the Kingdom of Denmark. And that future is not for sale. This was a declaration of a nation's collective will. However, the White House's response to this dignified stance explains why the crisis deepened. Hours later, Trump responded to the Prime Minister's words with the following: "Well, that's their problem, I disagree with him. I don't know who he is. Don't know anything about him. But that's going to be a big problem for him." This statement is more than a leader's political stance. It is a threat to the collective will of a nation. The people of Greenland do not want their land to be riddled with holes by American mining companies, turning Greenland into a black mining area. Environmental sensitivity is not just a preference for these people. It is a way of life. Trump's drill baby drill mentality is a nightmare scenario for people living among the glaciers. Drill baby drill. The Greenlanders' loyalty to Denmark is not just an emotional bond, but also a rational choice. Surveys and field analyses show that 85% of the population rejects becoming U.S. citizens. Why? Because they do not want to sacrifice Denmark's free education, universal health care, and strong social security network for the uncertainty and savage capitalism of the American system. This refusal is not hostility toward America, but a reflex to protect the Scandinavian social model. They see the healthcare crisis, income inequality, and social decay in the U.S. They say we will not integrate our children into this system, ironically. This anger is not confined to the streets of Nuuk or Copenhagen. It echoes in the corridors of Washington itself, at the heart of America. The American people absolutely reject the idea of their tax dollars. They're trillions of dollars being spent on an Arctic adventure with an uncertain outcome. Recent polls conducted by Reuters and Ipsos are nothing short of a shock for the White House. Only 17% of Americans support this acquisition. The vast majority of the remaining population sees it as an unnecessary, dangerous, and wasteful move. More importantly, when it comes to the use of military force, over 90% of the American public says no. The American people do not want to point weapons at their friends in Europe, their NATO allies. The long and exhausting memory of wars stretching from Vietnam to Afghanistan has created a natural immunity system in American society against embarking on a new adventure. This situation has turned into a major constitutional crisis in Washington, almost a political civil war. Members of Congress are drafting laws prohibiting the use of federal funds for military action against Denmark. This is a very rare situation in U.S. history. The legislative branch is using the power of the purse to tie the hands of the executive branch to prevent the commander-in-chief from mobilizing the army. However, the White House is not backing down. According to the latest information, Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio gathered at the White House to hold a final ultimatum meeting with their Danish counterparts. The only item on the agenda, the handover. In the halls of Congress, names like Senator Lisa Murkowski and Jeanne Shaheen are preparing a funding ban bill to tie Trump's hands. This bill is the moment when the brake mechanism of American democracy kicks in. Even 50% of Republicans think this plan is madness and will blow up NATO from within. Trump is becoming increasingly isolated in the White House, falling into the position of an emperor questioned even by his own party. This political isolation shows that the crisis is creating a deep fracture break. House bills and Senate bills are competing with each other. One freezes funds for acquisition and operation, while the other aims to block military shipments. This situation shows that the American state apparatus is locked within itself, that the decision-making mechanisms are at an impasse. Trump constantly brings up the 1867 purchase of Alaska, citing that vast piece of land purchased from Russia for $7.2 million. He says, "We did it then, we can do it again." It's just a real estate deal, but there is a huge reality he forgets or ignores. This is not the 19th century, and Greenlanders are not fixed assets to be bought and sold. Alaska was ridiculed at the time as Seward's folly, but it was a strategic move. Today, the Greenland Initiative is perceived less as a strategic move and more as an initiative that disregards the law of alliance. The fact that public support is so low shows that the American people also recognize this historical distinction. History actually teaches us another lesson. In 1946, President Truman also tried to buy Greenland. He offered $100 million. Denmark politely declined and Truman withdrew amicably. The alliance was not broken, relations were not damaged. The difference with Trump is his insistence on either nicely or by force. The global public currently views Greenland as akin to Hong Kong under Chinese pressure or Crimea under Russian occupation. Victimized yet proud, isolated yet resilient. And right now, one of the most surreal, dangerous, and unbelievable scenes in NATO history is unfolding on the Arctic ice. The German armed forces, the Bundeswehr, and British troops are landing in Greenland. Officially under the guise of an exercise but actually on a shield mission. The Danish Ministry of Defense has officially confirmed that the U.S. has deployed Vanguard units to the island in response to threats. The fact that planes belonging to the Polish airline Enter Air are transporting German soldiers marks that historic moment when Europe's common defense reflex ironically turned against the U.S. Now militarily stopped and held back by Congress, Trump is playing his most destructive card. The economic nuclear button, customs duties. The threat of a 25% additional tariff on Denmark and other NATO allies supporting this resistance has the potential to paralyze the already fragile global trade. The European Union's response to this blackmail is clear: unity. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen lectured Washington on law, saying Greenland belongs to its people, so it's up to Denmark and Greenland. And only to them. But it was French President Macron who dropped the real bombshell. Macron said, "We are not taking Greenland lightly. If the sovereignty of a European country and ally is affected, the chain reaction would be unprecedented," signaling collective defense against the U.S. These words are the official declaration that the Atlantic Alliance is now hanging by a thread. This situation turns the barrel of Trump's economic weapon back on himself. Historically, it is a known fact that tariffs trigger recessions. Now the world is holding its breath, watching to see whether the fuse of a global economic crisis will be lit over a piece of land. So why all this fighting just for profit, ice, and national pride? Absolutely not. Greenland has the largest alternative reserve of rare earth elements in the Western Hemisphere, which are the building blocks of modern technology and are used in everything from smartphones to fighter jets. China currently dominates this market. Trump is trying to create a fear empire by saying, "If we don't take it, China will." However, this argument does not match the reality on the ground for the Greenlandic people. The transpolar route opened up by melting glaciers is a new geopolitical corridor that will bypass the Suez Canal and shorten the trade route between Asia and Europe by thousands of kilometers. Trump aims to acquire Greenland to both sever China's Polar Silk Road and block Russia's northern exit, killing two birds with one stone, controlling strategic routes while securing rare metals, the oil of the future. While analysts see this as a strategic move, for the local population it means the uncontrolled transfer of their resources and an existential economic threat. The Greenlandic people do not want their land to be riddled with holes, turning Greenland into black mining. Environmental sensitivity prevails over strategic ambitions. For them, these lands are not a mining site but their ancestors' legacy and their children's future. The Chinese threat or the Russian threat does not legitimize American exploitation in their eyes. The environmental consciousness of the Greenlanders, like a wrench thrown into the gears of global capitalism, brings the entire system to a halt. However this crisis ends, one thing is now certain: NATO is no longer the old NATO. The 75-year-old alliance, a structure built on trust, has been permanently damaged in the cold waters of the Arctic. We now live in a new, unsettling, and chaotic world where the U.S. views its allies not as friends to protect but as prey to devour, and where Europe has established a defensive line against the U.S., deploying its own army against its ally. The cry of Kallalit Nunaat, shouted by Greenlanders in Nuuk Square in the midst of a snowstorm, became the manifesto not only of an island of 56,000 people, but of all nations that want to remain small but honorable in a multipolar world, refusing to sell their sovereignty for money. Ultimately, this tension in the Arctic is not a simple property dispute. It is a clash between the old world order and the search for new power. Russia and China are rubbing their hands together as they watch NATO's internal division. Germany shifting its troops from the eastern border to the north against its ally could be no greater gift for the Kremlin. If Trump does not abandon his stubbornness and stance in the Arctic, 2026 could mean the dissolution of NATO. We are not taking sides here. We are presenting a geopolitical projection of the possible consequences of the diplomatic rift on the ground. But one thing is certain right now. The people of Greenland, calling themselves Kallalit Nunaat, are sending a clear message to the world. We are not for sale, we are here, and we are not going anywhere. To hear the unfiltered truth, grasp the deepest analysis, and prepare for the coming storm, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications. We'll meet again at another breaking point in the world. For now, keep your eyes on the horizon and your mind open. Thank you for choosing